Back when I first got to college at Franciscan University in Steubenville, it was a bit of a culture shock for me because I'd been raised as a practicing Catholic. My family went to Mass on Sundays and holy days. We abstained from eating meat on Fridays in Lent. We did all the usual stuff. We even prayed the rosary sometimes on family vacations. But there were a lot of Catholic traditions and little elements that I hadn't seen before. And I remember one of the biggest moments of culture shock for me was at the announcement of quiet hours every night in our dorm, that we were an all-men's dorm, and every night once it hit, I think 10, the RAs would go around, whoever was on duty, and would gather guys at the center crossroads of each floor, and we would all pray Salve Regina together. We'd sing the Salve Regina, which already made me feel out of place since that was more Latin than I had learned in my entire life up to that point. And then often the RA would, with a bottle of holy water, bless all of the guys gathered there at the crossroads, would go by sometimes and bless each of the dorm rooms with the holy water, and then would go on, proceed to the next floor until he had announced quiet hours on all of the floors of the dorm. And that got to be a tradition to which I took very quickly, but I remember finding it interesting being blessed by my resident assistant. Like that, it seemed odd to me. I knew priests could bless people. I had seen that. I knew to a certain extent holy water could be used by people that weren't priests to bless stuff, but it still felt odd being directly blessed by effectively another college student who just happened to be a couple of years older than I was and was getting paid to live in the dorm rather than paying to live there. That authority is a fascinating thing in God's eyes and in the way that he expects us to interact with it, both in the church and outside of the church by nature. That any true, legitimate exercise of authority, if it is just, is a sharing in the authority of God the Father himself. And so that's why we as Catholics, when we reflect for confession on the fourth commandment, honor thy father and mother, we recognize that that does in fact apply primarily to mom and dad, but it also applies to the police. It applies to legitimate public figures who have a right to institute and enforce laws. It applies, in spite of the fact that there were nights when we didn't want it to the resident assistant in our dormitories in college. And that authority comes with lessons and virtues on both sides of the leadership role. That on the one hand, there's an expectation of obedience on our part to legitimate authority, but on the part of the leader themselves, there is an expectation of both responsibility and blessing, that they will be a blessing for the people entrusted to their care. And so that's why I find it actually beautiful, and I didn't know this growing up, so it doesn't really astound me how many people aren't aware of it, but recognizing the legitimate authority that parents have over their children and seeing this long line from the Old Testament to today of God trying to help us to understand that in the early covenants God made with mankind, the priesthood was not originally taken from the Levites. That long before the Levites existed, the priest was the father of the family. That's who the priests were expected to be, that dad was the priest. That after we messed that up, then the firstborns were the priest. But the father was always seen as the head of the household, as also high priest of the local church, the most fundamental building block of the church, that is the family. In what Christ has done for us, and in the sacrament of baptism, there's an expansion that takes place. That all Christians now, in some respect, share in not the ministerial priesthood, which is what I do, but share in the royal priesthood of Jesus Christ. So that in all of the legitimate roles of authority that we hold, we are able to be blessings in God's name. And so both dad and mom play in their respective ways the role of priest for their children. That those of you who are parents, like, you have as much of a right to extend a blessing to your children as I have to extend a blessing to you. Like that's actually a real blessing. Those aren't just words you're saying. Like that actually means something. That you have spiritual jurisdiction over your family, and when in God's name and united to him, you tell demons to leave, or you ask God to bless your kids and protect them from harm before they go on a trip, or you extend a blessing to them because they're nervous about going to confession, or whatever it is, that actually does something. Like, I don't think we realize that, but as parents, you don't just have like figurative authority in a vague sense. You have spiritual jurisdiction over your children. I don't think we always understand that or exercise it. But if my RA could bless us with holy water, how much more of a right do you have to bless your children with holy water before they go to bed every night? And I didn't check before Mass started. We were a little busy, so they may all be gone by now. If they are, come find me and I'll put out more. But I actually put out a bunch of holy water bottles in the back of the church by the entrance by the Adoration Chapel, that if you don't have holy water at home, like, please take it. That's why we consecrate like 40 gallons of it at a time. That's not just because we like to hoard holy things. We do that so that you guys can have it too. Like, in my mind, spiritual combat is hard enough when we're using every weapon at our disposal. It seems silly to gimp ourselves and not take advantage of the stuff the church gives us. So please grab one of those. We have a giant metal tankard in the back corner by the usher's closet that we try to keep full of holy water. Take one of those empty bottles and fill it up there and bring it home. And then when it gets empty, you come back and you do that again. That is your holy water. And use it. Bless your kids' bedrooms with it. Bless them with it. Bless your meals with it. If things are going crazy in your house and people are really struggling and you feel like you're under spiritual attack, run around your house and bless your house with it. It's not quite the same as a house blessing, but you do have spiritual authority there. Kids, because our parents derive their names, father and mother, from the fatherhood of God the Father himself, there's an expectation that we're going to obey them, as annoying as that is. And as much as we might dislike that at times, if your parents ask you to do chores, don't wait until they've told you for the 47th time to do it. If they ask you to do your homework before you play video games, then out of love for Jesus Christ, do your homework before you play the video games. Like, that's not merely an exercise of self-discipline. That's actually spiritual obedience to God, our Heavenly Father. Like, in doing that, you are giving praise to God. You are living your vocation and you're growing in holiness. It may not feel like you're growing in holiness. It may just feel like you're really annoyed. But I promise you, sometimes those two do look alike, and it's easy to mistake one for the other. Jesus himself, and lest we forget, Jesus is the God who created the entire universe. When he entered into our world, he became a human being and a baby, and he actually obeyed his parents when they gave him commands. Did Jesus have to obey Mary and Joseph? No. He's the one who invented them. Jesus literally invented their personalities. Nonetheless, he obeyed them when they told him to clean up his room, which is an immensely humorous image to have in your head of Jesus being told that he has to stop playing kickball and actually go clean his bedroom. And I wonder how messy of a child Jesus was now. But if Jesus Christ himself obeyed his parents, he did so for two reasons. One, because it glorified God the Father, and it was an act of spiritual worship in a real sense. But two, because it left an example that he expected us to follow. That if even he was obedient, so too should we. But parents, the responsibility of leadership comes with the responsibility to be a blessing. As our second reading so beautifully put it today, fathers, do not provoke your children so they may not become discouraged. That the respect in our families is meant to be a two-way street. You may have to, and in fact, you at times must discipline your children, but please always strive to do it out of love and not out of anger. That discipline is part of parental leadership, and it's part of teaching children virtue. But try to do it remembering that the authority that you are using is the authority of God the Father, and he's going to ask for an accounting for it one day. That our families are the first schools of love for us as human beings, and they are the central, fundamental building blocks of the church. It's one of the things that I find so beautiful and powerful when you look at occasions throughout history where missionaries have broken into pagan cultures, have converted numerous people to Christianity, and then there's been a strong pushback, and the priests have been slaughtered, Bibles have been burned, and Christianity has been oppressed and kicked out of the societies, and they've been left with an underground Christianity. It's not the priest that kept the Christianity going in those cases, because he was dead. It was the families that did that. It was moms and dads teaching their kids how to pray, raising them in the ways of the Lord, so that when missionaries returned 150 years later, they found large communities of Christians still there, still practicing the faith, still knowing the teachings of Mother Church. That the most fundamental building block of the church is your home. And that's why Satan hates it so much. And why in the vision from the visionaries at Fatima, why Sister Lucia said that the final battle between God and Satan will be over the human family. Because our families are the bedrock, the foundation on which society and Mother Church are built. Never underestimate the dignity of the role that you play in your family, of the love and the self-sacrifice that you offer there. Because if you as a child are able to be obedient, even and especially on the occasions when you don't want to be, if you as a parent are able to be patient and loving and just, even and especially on the occasions when you don't want to be, you are teaching your children and other people and the entire world what the Holy Trinity looks like. You're teaching them what the heavenly kingdom looks like. You are an inroad of the kingdom of God come early. And that is a beautiful and a powerful thing. Jesus, Mary, and Joseph have several feast days all on their own. They didn't need another feast day where we celebrated all three of them together. But there's a reason that the church did this. Because the focus today is not just on them as individuals and holy people and or God. The focus today, this weekend, is on them as a family and why that matters, both for them and for us. Because today we rejoice in the great love and tenderness that the three of them showed each other, the obedience Jesus showed, and the blessing that Joseph and Mary were to him and to one another. But then we also, by God's grace, follow the example that they've left, that we walk the path that they trod. so that the Holy Family that we celebrate is not merely theirs, but one day, pray God, each of our own as well.